am Prentiss Dantzler, Associate Professor of Sociology and Director of the Housing Justice Lab at the University of Toronto. It's great to be here. I've been studying housing for about 15 years now. I originally started studying housing because I graduated undergrad in 2009, which was a great time to graduate in this economy. And went back home and found out that my dad, who owned a house at the time, was going through a foreclosure. And so trying to figure out, what is going on, how can we save this house, and started looking into the policies that were actually around the house, started looking into the housing finance, and realized that, most mortgages, those days you get 2, 3, 4%. My dad had a 9% interest rate, right, on a house that wasn't worth that much in a neighborhood that most people weren't investing in. And so since then, I've been kind of focused on what's really going on in the neighborhoods and how different neighborhoods have different value structures, how these housing policies are actually creating more bigger issues for people in these communities. And how can we think about housing as like the center of how we think about social life, right? Disruption in housing can really drastically change a family's kind of trajectory. And so for the last 15 years, I've been looking at kind of housing, neighborhood change, and displacement as a result.
Tell us a bit more about how you came to that housing justice, but how did that become an area of study for you?
Yeah, so at the time, I was really interested in public housing, right? And so down the street from where I lived, there was a massive public housing site. And overnight, it seemed like that area was kind of gated up and boarded up. What happened was that the federal government had programs like the Hope 6 program in the United States. And it was used to kind of redevelop distressed communities. And so when these buildings were being built through that process, I'm like, so what happened to all the people that used to live there? Where did they go? And what a lot of the research was, I was really interested in that, and I went to the research. And what a lot of the research said was that people get displaced. Sometime they can come back, but there was no guarantee. And so because there was a lack of guarantee for people to come back home, I was really interested in how those dynamics really were changing the neighborhood. And so I started to study kind of U.S. housing policy or public housing to look at where people were moving, what types of neighborhoods were they moving to, and how long were they actually living in public housing? Because it was this bigger narrative that people were staying there too long. And so it was designed as a temporary program, but became a permanent home for a lot of communities. And what I found was, given the kind of racial tones and the racial mythologies of where people live and why they live there, I found was that there weren't big racial differences in the rates of exits among public housing residents, but you did see that Black households were staying in that housing long term. Since then, I saw this as also a political site. And so we know that there's the history of public housing has also been a source of political and community organizing. It's been used as a kind of a political geography and not just a house, right? And so it kind of reiterates the importance of community housing as not just a space for people to call home, but an opportunity for them to be full citizens into that kind of democratic society. And so since then, that's why I've been engaging in how to understand community housing, neighborhood change, and also anti-displacement efforts.
Why are events like CHRA's National Congress important for housers to come together as that collective?
How many times do we actually get to come together and talk about stuff, right? And so a lot of ways we kind of function in isolation. You're doing what you're doing, I'm doing what I'm doing, and we're not seeing the ways in which we can work together or learn from one another. This is one of the few events where you can get a lot of housers to actually come forward and talk about strategies, talk about things that actually work, talk about policies that didn't work. And so for me, it's really kind of encouraging people to say, if you want to talk about housing and learn from each other, this is probably the number one place that you should be coming.
Perfect. So you heard it here first. This is the number one place to come together to strategize about housing as housers. So we will see you in Saskatoon, April 29th to May 1st, 2025. See you there.